All righty, we're going to get started. I know there's still some people joining, but just want to make sure we give you plenty of time, Parker, to get everything in. So good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the fifth fireside chat in our series of webinars. We're really happy to continue bringing different experts and information from various fields with, again, different information to all of you that are trying to help through these challenging times that we know everybody's experiencing around the country and around the world. I'm Frank Niesenbaum, VP of Sales for E2B Tech and C2B Tech, and I'll be your host today. I'm excited to have Parker Wilson join me from Avalara, international sales tax and other area experts. And Parker will be helping us today to understand a little bit more about how this pandemic is changing the way consumers are shopping, but really specifically around sales tax and compliance, which is a pain even when there isn't a pandemic that we all know about. So our goal is to provide some information to help you and your business navigate through these uncertain times, as well, hopefully to come out on the other side stronger than ever. So I hope everyone is still enjoying the warmth of our fireplaces behind us, and frankly, with the snow on the ground here in Ohio that I woke up to, it's kind of a nice feeling today to have a little snow or a little heat behind us. I mean, even in these tough times and challenging times, we know that everyone's working differently, shopping differently, doing all those things. And I think we all can remain confident that, you know, through the community spirit I'm seeing, we're all seeing out there in the cooperation, that we'll get through this and get back on a vibrant path here, not too far down the road. So again, you know, welcome, Parker. I'm glad and appreciate you taking a little time in your busy day to help us. And today, as we talked about, we're going to talk about, you know, the pandemic changing the way consumers are shopping, and again, really specific to taxing. But before we begin, I just wanted to start with a couple of poll questions. The first one, just to get a sense from the audience, you know, how people are currently managing their tax compliance. A lot of options up there, using automation to handle it, using native ERP functionality to handle it. That's also common in many cases. Manually researching tax rules and rates, or maybe a combination of 2 and 3. So we'll just give everybody a couple minutes to answer, and then we'll go to the next one. Some shy people out there. We are broadcasting on Facebook. I don't think they can answer though. Few more seconds. Okay, that's helpful. So the second question, just to get an idea of what some of you may be struggling with when it comes to taxes, tax compliance, searching state websites for the latest rules and regs. That's fun. Managing exempt customers and keeping up to date with their certificates, or having to report on and file in all the states on all the different timelines. So we'll look for some answers there and get a sense of what people are doing. Time. Okie dokie. All righty, that's helpful. Good information. We wanted to, you know, again, just get a sense of the audience. That helps a little bit. So anyway, thank you for that. So Parker, you know, obviously we're here to talk about sales tax compliance, how things have changed, what businesses probably should be thinking about to be prepared. So, you know, why, in your opinion, why is tax compliance automation that businesses should be thinking about and asking about right now maybe more than ever before?
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
curious.
Absolutely. And Frank and E2B team, thanks so much for having me on and including me. Um,
Awesome.
really where it comes about is just all the rules, rates, and boundary information that are different from state to state. I think there's around 12 to 13,000 different taxing jurisdictions within the continental U.S. And
Yeah.
that's a large burden to put on small to medium sized businesses. And then not to mention the Supreme Court ruled recently around the South Dakota versus Wayfair case, that now changed sales tax completely. And really, what this did was it now gave businesses the obligation to not be able to keep track of their nexus obligations. Now it's on the consumer themselves, due to these economic nexus thresholds, generally in
Yeah.
the flavor of $100,000 or 200 separate orders. So if you just have 200 orders in a certain state based on their rules and laws, that potentially is now creating an obligation for you. And so that's a real burden to keep track of.
Yeah. Anything more about that Wayfair case specifically, or just it was kind of in general?
Yeah, so I guess more so along the lines, it happened in June. States then started releasing these statutes. And so now businesses have to keep up with the statutes and their sales data. So kind of compiling all that information together puts a lot of burden on the actual team itself, whether it's a one-man accounting firm, or internally, whether they're managing and keeping up with this information. It's just something where a tool to maybe manage this may be more effective and efficient for time purposes.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure it's a case everybody follows and pay attention to. You mentioned Nexus, so I'm going to I wanted to jump there a little bit. So, anyone who's unsure about where they have nexuses, or frankly what nexus is, because I'm sure there's some that might not even really totally understand it, how, or how they should be handling tax compliance. What's the best way to start? What's the first step you can recommend for the nexus piece, and maybe a little bit about what nexus really is?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with just Nexus as a whole. So Nexus is a legal term or industry term that means physical presence or sufficient physical presence. And Frank, this actually dates all the way back to a court case in 1992
Wow.
between North Dakota and Quill Corp. And what actually happened was Quill Corp lost, or excuse me, won the battle itself. They were a company that had salespeople traveling throughout the state, passing out catalogs. And so these companies were purchasing, I think it was like paper and office supplies. And so companies were purchasing these office supplies, and the state of North Dakota said, "Hey, Quill Corp, we think you have a presence here," and so challenged them. And then it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Quill Corp and said, "Sorry, North Dakota, they don't have an obligation because they don't have a physical presence or a brick and mortar store." And so that was
Wow.
kind of the start where you saw states then started enacting their own legislation around now activities. And so what I mean by that is like a salesperson traveling, even attending trade shows, housing product in a third party warehouse, just to name a few, are all physical presence creating activities that folks do overlook. And then now added to it the South Dakota versus Wayfair court case ruling, now adds another layer of complexity to Nexus, in the economic Nexus sense. So dollar value or number of orders sold into that state.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So, thinking about that, maybe some, advice about and again, as we're talking about here today in the pandemic, we've seen a lot, right? So,
Sure.
even in our individual lives, we're all shopping online now, or we're doing different ways of getting the things we need during the pandemic. But I think we saw some of that coming before this, and I think it's going to continue. So if they're maybe looking at adding e-commerce, or, as you just mentioned, selling in other states, um, you know, what advice do you have, or some conversations, and what makes it hard collecting multiple states? What makes it so complicated? I mean, we have heard about Nexus now, and some of the legal things, but what advice or what problems do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of along the lines of that first piece to it, kind of where to start, right? Um, we have a tool. we would always suggest you talk to your current professionals, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. So if you have folks that you trust currently, we
Yeah.
suggest you reaching out to them. If you don't have those folks, that's okay. You can always come to us. We have folks internally comprised of former auditors, current tax attorneys, and they can actually perform a Nexus study for you. Before you even get to that point, we actually just came out with a Nexus assessment tool. So it's not legal advice by any means, but it will give you kind of an idea on maybe where to start there. Around kind of what makes it so complicated to collect in multiple states. It's really a state by state basis. Like in I think we were talking earlier about Michigan. Michigan only has one sales tax rate, right? So that makes it a little more simple as opposed to maybe here in where I'm in North Carolina. There's over 106 different jurisdictions you
Yeah.
potentially have to keep up with. So as far as filling out a sales tax return here in North Carolina, or maybe California, right, or some of the more difficult ones, you actually have to break out the sales tax by jurisdiction. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a way to keep track of the jurisdictional breakdown within your internal system, it makes it really difficult to file that, and putting together some report or a pivot table or something along those lines to ensure that you have the right information and are filing it correctly. Because the more times that you file incorrectly, the more times you're kind of raising your hand to the state saying, hey, potentially come take a look at my information because I'm providing you the wrong details.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned North Carolina, Michigan, and California. I know here in Ohio, the taxing goes all the way down to the street level and the counties, and we have the regional rapid tax or other things are all collected by the county and all through the sales tax. And I know back in my accounting days when I was doing that, it was crazy trying to file those reports and keep track of all that. And I know the ERP systems help with some of it, but it's all manual. So there's something missing, which is what you offer. It can be helpful. So kind of
Exactly.
talk, yeah, I'm kind of talking about, taxes. We've talked about Nexus, a lot of different other things. So, and I know this is almost a can of worms because we've had conversations with the
Sure.
Avalara team multiple times for clients, but outside of the economic Nexus. So, what other types of things do the auditors pay attention to? And I know they come in, the sales tax auditors or whatever, and maybe some tips you might have about how they can avoid the audit, first of all, but if not, how do you prepare for them when they're coming in? Some thoughts around that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, having a repeatable process to keep track of the rules, the rates, the boundary information, that's going to be key. Another thing that a lot of folks run into is the management of the exemption certificates. It's low-hanging fruit for the auditor because what they are looking for is, hey, why did this business not charge, or why did this company not charge this potential business or vendor sales tax? And so they're going to want to know that and have proof as to why they didn't. And the proof there is that exemption certificate. And it's not just a piece of paper, and there needs to be kind of a better process around keeping track of it than having it in, we've heard before, a shoebox, a filing cabinet, right? It's a
Yeah.
living, breathing document that has monetary value associated to it. And if the certificate is invalid, it's like not having that certificate at all. So
Wow.
we actually have a tool as well to help manage the entire process around the exemption certificate and managing that, and then also ensuring that you're filing on time. So it kind of goes together with our full suite of products that can assist you in keeping track, having an audible, repeatable process internally, so that way you don't have to worry about if an auditor does come, that you're compliant. And really our tool itself is kind of a sales tax insurance policy, because now you're not going to have to take the time to worry about it up front, but also on the back end, if you are to ever be audited, our tool will help manage that. One other thing too to mention, Frank, is most folks say, hey, yeah, I'm never going to be audited. And that very well may be the case. What we have found is that some of the larger companies that have smaller clients, they get audited very often and see that these smaller clients aren't charging sales tax to this larger company and want to know why. So that's kind of how it opens. As you said, the can of worms is actually auditors auditing these larger companies and figuring out who their clients or who they have a business relationship with. So just that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I know that, again, these audits can be painful. They're random. They come out of nowhere. You've got to be prepared for it. And I think, as you're talking about folks in multiple states and every state's different and down to the county level, whatever it might be. And there's so many different changes. And then I guess that's the part of it, right? So how do you keep up with the changes in terms of all the new regs coming out, or when they make a change? I'm sure that you deal with that too.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's built into the tool. What we found is that most folks do manage this internally, and it is a manual process where they have to go in, look up the rules, rates, and boundary information. Now,
Yeah.
that's not to say that they all change at once. States are a little bit different in how they change. Some change monthly, some change quarterly, and they don't change them all. It's just 1, 2, 5 here, something along those
Right.
lines.
Yeah.
But that's a pain to keep up with. Like, hey, where is it changing? Who's changing it? And then not only do you have to get that information and make sure you have the right information, but then now you got to go put it in the system and ensure that that's up to date. So our
Yeah.
tool itself is always managing that in the back end through our cloud platform. So
Yeah.
we have a team internally, about 100 folks on our content team. They're always keeping up with the rules, the rates, the boundary information, and then taking it even a step further, Frank, the actual products themselves. So what these clients or companies are selling also matter based on, is it taxable, is it
Yeah.
non-taxable, and so we also have that information built in, roughly around 3,000 different codes that the client themselves would be able to match to that, and we would keep up with that on an ongoing basis. Things like school supplies, there's back to school holidays. So keeping track of all of those, I
Right.
mean, it can go on and on, but our tool itself, once it's added into their Sage platform or whatever platform they're utilizing, whether it's e-commerce, their shopping cart, things of that nature, it'll keep track of that, and they'll never have to worry about that again, kind of getting the ability to have their resources put to maybe revenue generating activities.
Yeah. And that makes total sense. Much better focused on that than tax collection and reporting.
Exactly.
So here's kind of an odd one, maybe a little different. So, different people in the audience, distributors, manufacturers, whatever they are. But let's say I am a manufacturer and most of my sales are exempt. Does that mean that, I don't need to think about, or I'm not impacted by any of this? Is there something there that I might be missing?
Yeah, great question, and we run into this a lot in the Sage space, dealing with manufacturers. Um, the answer to that is you are impacted by this, and the way that you're impacted by this is because some of these states, their economic nexus thresholds are looking at gross sales, meaning not just taxable sales, but also sales that are exempt. And what everyone forgets about, and I kind of touched on this a little earlier, exemption certificates is a large part of the sales tax process. And if you're not keeping track of it and managing it effectively and efficiently, again, that is one of the low-hanging fruit for the auditors. So the folks that say that and want to bury their head in the sand, we're not able to help them. But the folks that do want to be compliant and are looking for help in this, certainly it is a factor. You are impacted by this, and there are tools out there to help you do this more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, hey, it's funny. I always think about it. Say, well, we're manufacturers. We don't sell the public, or we sell through distributors, or we do
Yep.
whatever. They're still going to have the same issues. Whether it's exemption certificates, like you mentioned, or maybe it's use tax.
Yes,
I don't know.
exactly.
That's a whole nother animal that I probably don't have to have a lot of time to get into, but that's out there too, right? I mean, use
You
tax
got
is
it.
another one. Yeah.
You got it. Absolutely.
Well, so let's, I guess, just to kind of shift a little bit, there's a term out there, streamlined sales tax. I guess if you're not familiar with it, maybe people are, maybe you can explain a little bit about what that is and why should someone care about, streamlined sales tax?
Yeah, sure. So the streamlined sales tax, also known as SST, is
Yeah.
a fantastic program. It's actually mandated outside of Avalera. So this is not an Avalera program, but a state-specific program where 24 states got together, to
Wow.
unify and make sales tax more streamlined, right? Hence the name. And so really what this means is these states themselves are actually reaching out to companies like Avalara and asking them to be what they call a CSP, which just stands for a certified solution or service provider.
Uh,
And what they do is they actually are paying Avalara to assist companies in getting registered, doing the tax collection and calculation, as well as the sales tax filings. And so if the company potentially applies or is able to utilize this program, they can potentially get some of those services at no additional cost from Avalara. So it's a fantastic program. Definitely something to read up on. We have a lot of information on it on our website. So feel free to go there and learn a little bit more. But it is a fantastic program, and we enjoy partnering with these states.
Yeah, that's wow. I like that. I mean, wow, the state organizations actually joining together and coming up with something easier for everybody to use, and working with organizations like yours to make it easier for us out here in the real world trying to collect sales tax.
That's
Wow,
right.
it's stunning. I'm impressed, and that wasn't even a pandemic thing. It's real, right? It's already been
That's
out
right.
there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
been out
I'd
there
be
for a
curious
while.
to. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that'll be really helpful. So I know we've been talking a little bit. You've kind of been all over the gamut of the different things that are out there, and I know a lot of great information. But kind of as we're kind of winding down, maybe take a few minutes and talk about, and you have a little bit, but just in terms of tax compliance automation, which is kind of what we're building up here, how that can help in the different pieces of the things you've talked about and help people with all these complicated processes. I mean, just as, obviously you have to collect sales tax, get tax exempt certificates. So how does automation help with that? And what are some suggestions around that? I mean, again, it's obviously Avalara or whatever they may be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first piece that I'll say is that knowing and understanding your nexus obligations is going to be kind of the tip of the spear and the first place um, that that I would start as a salesperson or as anyone at Avalara would mention to you, because automation itself is fantastic and great, and we'll get to that. But not knowing your nexus obligations, the tool itself is only as good as the information being given. So if you don't leave here with anything from me, I would say understanding your nexus obligation as a business is the paramount and most important piece. And we have services to assist with that, whether it's the nexus study that does have a one-time cost associated to it, or our free nexus assessment tool. Those are things that we would highly suggest you start with. So after you understand your nexus obligation, now the compliance piece of it, keeping up with this on an ongoing basis. We have three different parts or pieces, if you will. One is our AvaTax product, which manages the rules, rates, boundary information, as well as keeping up with the sales tax codes that we have internally. I like to call it our secret sauce. It's just managing what's taxable and what's not. So for someone to keep up with that internally, that's a full-time job, right? And so having a tool that doesn't take sick leave, it doesn't have to work from home, right? It's
Yeah.
a cloud-based solution that you can always have someone that can log in from anywhere in the world, as long as they have internet access. Keeps track of that and manages it, right? So that's kind of the first piece is the AvaTax product that can be integrated to over 700 different platforms.
Wow.
Whether it's I know E2B manages and has a Sage piece to it,
Yep.
but also any other integrations you potentially would need or have. Chances are we have an integration to it. If we don't have an integration, we also have open APIs that can be built out as well. So some of those tech folks out there that are listening in, we do have an open API that you can potentially build in as well. The second piece is the exemption certificate piece, right? So for the people that are selling B2B or the manufacturers, just managing that entire life cycle is a very difficult task. And also sometimes it can fall on
Yeah.
the customer service folks. And increasing customer satisfaction is what we understand a lot of businesses are working towards, and obviously always kind of an uphill battle. This is another way to help increase that customer satisfaction in having
Yeah.
them fill a certificate out right there online through our web portal. So it makes it very easy. We found that a lot of folks say they go and ask, hey, can you please send us our exemption certificate? And their customers are like, exemption certificate, Frank, what's that?
What's
They,
that?
they don't know what that is, which is okay. So
Yeah.
a little education there can help, as
Yeah.
well as a tool to help kind of guide the client or the customer's client in the right direction as far as managing and maintaining those exemption certificates when potentially sales tax shouldn't be applied because of who they're selling to, or potentially what they're selling.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, and then the third piece is the filing and remittance. So we have kind of kind of formulating the entire suite, is kind of rounding it out is the managed return service. And so what this is a kind of a full service file remit tool, and it takes the information that once we've calculated it properly, and then we guarantee to file on time, and we'll handle any notices as well. So so great stuff. Happy to talk about it in more detail
Yeah.
for folks that need it. Generally, the best way is to let your folks at E2B know that you are interested, and then they can get you to the right person over here internally, and then us diving into your specific needs. Every business is a little bit different, just like every state kind of has different rules and regulations. So we're happy to chat with you about that and get you more detail. We're not going to force it down your throat if it's not a good fit. That potentially is the case. We do have a lot of folks that potentially can be the case. The reality out here is that everyone has some obligation in dealing with sales tax. So we potentially do have a tool for you.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, as you know, ERP organization selling, you know, software, cloud, on-premise, whatever, we've worked with you guys a lot. And I think if nothing else, the fact that all you do is tax-oriented work lets everybody know that it really is what it is. It is that complicated. It is that much of a pain and can be a struggle, and you know, an entire business built around solving those problems and making the issues. I know it's been great for us to work with you guys, and our clients love it. And again, I thank you for your insight. I mean, there was a lot of great information. We covered a lot in 30 minutes or under, and I know that sales tax and all that is not that simple to do, but I do appreciate your joining us. There was a lot of good information, a lot of valuable information, and you did bring a lot to it. Up on the screen, for those that for those that have been attending the webinars, we do have a few more coming up. I hope this information was helpful. I do believe that this is a major issue for everyone today and going forward. I know it was in the past. So, you know, if there's anything on there that's of value to you, we hope you'll attend, and we'll continue to bring information to everybody as we get through this crazy time. So stay safe down there in North Carolina, Parker, and I look forward to talking to you in real life somewhere here, not in too distant future. So, but thanks again.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate you taking time.
Oh
Awesome.
no, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and we'll chat soon.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks, Parker.
All right, bye now.
Thanks, everyone.